welcome back to another edition of Real Estate Insights, conversations with industry leaders. And today I have got a special guest, Bobby Horncastle with Premier Transaction Coordination Services. And we're going to talk about the role and the process of a transaction coordinator. But Bobby is the founder and CEO of Premier Transaction Coordinating Services. His expertise is specializing in real estate transaction coordination and management services. And he's got a reputation known for adapting services to align perfectly with business operations in the real estate sector. So, Bobby, I want to welcome you to my show here, and I appreciate you coming on board and sharing some facts and ideas about transaction coordinated services and how this is so important for real estate agents today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm excited to go over this and, because there's not everyone knows what a transaction coordinator is, what they do. Sometimes, I have an assistant, but there is some, crucial differences that, were helpful for real estate agents. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've got some specific tasks that you do and accomplish and that are very beneficial for the average real estate agent. And I think that you're right. I think agents don't know or understand what the process is. And so hopefully we can provide some clarity today so that anybody that's even given it consideration can maybe even reach out and have a conversation with you and see if it's something that would be fitting to their services. So let's talk a little bit about the role and the importance of the transaction coordinator services in real estate. How do you work with an agent's buyer or seller when it comes to the transaction coordinating service?
yeah. So we pride ourselves on being a concierge level of service, and we don't just say that, we actually follow that. So what we do as soon as we get a new transaction from the agent, we make sure we pick up the phone and introduce ourselves to the client. That way it causes a lot of it. There's no confusion about who's this person reaching out. I thought I'm working with an agent. We introduce ourselves, let them know, hey, I'm Bobby. I'm with Premier TC Services. I'm working with Paul, and I'm his transaction manager. This is what I do, contract to close. This is what I'll be helping you with. Earnest deposits due in a couple days. Obviously, your agent's still here if you need anything, but I'm going to be reaching out for a lot of paperwork and the administrative stuff and helping you there. If you have any questions, just reach out. And then from there, we start by sending our introduction emails and making sure everyone knows who we are.
Yeah. So for the agent that feels like, well, I don't want to have a transaction coordinator because I don't want to give up the communicating with my buyer or my seller, right? That's so because some agents actually feel this way. As a former managing broker, I heard this from agents is that
Definitely.
I don't want to stop communicating, and they feel like that is what they have to do, but that's not the case, right?
No, absolutely not. So the idea is that we're focusing on all the administrative and transaction stuff, contract to close, and it frees up the agent to spend more time on other customers, but obviously importantly also that customer still, making sure that you're touching base with them a little bit more. For example, we send out, we call it a one sheet every Monday, and it goes out to everyone in the transaction, and it has absolutely all the due dates, where we're at on them, if it's completed yet, if we're working on it, if it's scheduled. And I always recommend our agents to reach out to their clients on that day because they've got it right in front of them, an update of everything going on. They can check in on that personal level, still go over everything in the transaction. And if anything, I feel like it would make it a little bit more better for the client because the agent's a lot more focused and fine-tuned on, the customer experience instead.
Yeah. So it really is creating better time management for the agent, right? It's because you've taken away all this little tedious things that we need to do and taken it off of our plate, and where, we can still follow up and, maintain our business and do what we got to do, but you're doing all the behind the scenes stuff and make sure everybody's on the same page.
Exactly. Yeah. The idea is as soon as it goes under contract, we do everything to kind of guide it to closing. And then the agent can kind of take a bit of a step back on the administrative stuff, but obviously not the client relationships. But we save our agents probably anywhere from 15 to 20 hours per transaction, which is pretty significant. Some agents don't see it that way because, they're in the car driving and then they do something for an hour, maybe in that evening. And then it's a quick 30 minutes or a quick 5-minute call. But all those quick 5 minutes and interruptions in your day add up. And going back to what you said about time management, it's hard to manage your time when you have a bunch of buyers and sellers pinging you with questions and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would think too that this would also be a way to manage errors, right? Or maybe make there be a error reduction in the sense that you're sending out checklists. You've got a checklist, right? And you're sending it out every week. So the agent can review it. The homeowner, buyer, seller can also see it. The other agent in the transaction gets a copy and can see it. So, and I know that most agents don't work off of checklists and
right?
do everything right. They're kind of,
And the
and
compliance for the brokerage too.
yeah. And I'm guilty too. I mean, a lot of stuff is up here, and I'm like, oh yeah, I got to remember to call so and so because yeah, today's the deadline for the EMD or something. Yeah, having those checklists, it's got to be big saver in creating error reduction, right?
Yeah, and how we kind of see it too is as well as obviously the checklist to make sure nothing falls through the cracks and us managing it for the agent and reducing those errors. Also, the compliance work for the brokerage. I've noticed, I mean, I've managed a brokerage before, and compliance has always been the biggest issue chasing agents to get paperwork. So we kind of take that off of the agent completely because we were reviewing all the paperwork for the agent. We're coordinating signatures and stuff like that on addendas and disclosures. So yeah, that helps with the compliance and errors.
Yeah. So being that you do work with multiple brokerages and compliance departments in those brokerages, and there's many platforms, right? So how do you handle the differences in the technology integration? Because, you do have to work on different platforms. So how do you
Yeah.
handle that?
So we have a platform which we use. It's not ours directly, called Open to Close. And how we use it and leverage it is we have like a separate tab for each agent. So we know all the different platforms they're using. So it's easily organized for the transaction manager. And when we set up the first file, we put the defaults of like signature lines and things like that right away. So there can never be a mistake of us accidentally sending out on behalf of a different agent or something like that, or logging into the wrong platform. Our transaction managers are organized in, being able to work in those different platforms because we have additional checklists again of, okay, this agent has this compliance for their brokerage. This agent has this compliance for their brokerage. And we just kind of work off those additional checklists for the agents.
Yeah, checklists are so critical. I mean, it really, in whatever aspect you're dealing with, right? It's just, because there's so much that we have to remember and all these little things that we have to do. And I know that, I mean, 21 years in the business, and I know all the things, but I still miss some things if I don't have a checklist to
Right.
guide me. It's just real easy to miss something. So it's good that you guys are working off of that, and the fact that you have a platform. Now, being that you're on your own platform, how do you work it? Do you work it where you do upload and do things in other agents' platforms themselves, or how does that work?
Correct. Yeah. So the idea is we want to make it as seamless and easy for the agent as possible. So they usually provide us with their login credentials. Let's say they use Dotloop for their brokerage. And then, yeah, we just log into their Dotloop and we make sure everything's in compliance for them and their brokerage. So that's how we kind of manage that. And going back to checklists a little bit, and in our technology is the checklist that we have, we actually share it directly with the agent in real time. So they can see if, if we're never not going to do something, but they're going to see in real time, okay, this is due today. Has my TC done it yet? Yes, you'll see it checked off, which is really cool because the agent also sees the checklist and they can kind of micromanage the TC without micromanaging them.
All right. Yeah. So walk me through the process from like beginning to end for an agent that has never used a transaction coordinator and they're just like, well, I don't get it. I don't need this. And walk us through the process so that somebody can see that, wow, this is actually quite simple, and help them understand what they would be looking at here.
Yeah. So again, with my background in running real estate brokerages, I know that, you're busy. Everyone's busy entrepreneur. You're a CEO of your own business. So you can't spend that time, maybe setting it up yourself. So how we kind of do it is, let's say you, Paul, you wanted to start using our services, you'd connect with me. We'd go over kind of why you haven't used a TC before, some of your preferences, things like that. And then from there, we set you up on a call with your transaction manager and our team manager, who is a licensed broker. And we do that obviously so that we have the expertise in-house with managing transactions, and we have the support for our transaction managers. So from there, we send you an agreement, and then we send you a one-time intake form is what we call it. That's where you can tell us if you charge a transaction fee, who your preferred vendors are, any brokerage specific documents and addendas, things like that. And then once you're able to connect with your transaction manager and our team manager, that's where you can set your expectations right out the gate of, this is what I like to do. This is what I don't like to do. This is what I'm maybe skeptical of. I like this type of template to go out at this time. I want to add this template. I want to take this one away. And we can really kind of get together in that way and personalize it to you, because at the end of the day, it's your business that we're working with. We want to make sure that we customize to how you want to do things because it's your business. It's not how you shouldn't have to adapt to us,
Yeah, you work with all kinds of different agents, so it's good that you're adaptable to, what our needs are. That really is critical because every agent works so differently. right? But
And
I
what we
think
love,
there will be some conformity though that the agents need to do, right? Because they've got to follow the checklist. They've got to be able to submit all the documents to you because without that, yeah, you can't do your job.
yeah,
So.
no, exactly.
Yeah. So when you're working on these transactions, what happens when a transaction falls apart, which does more times than we'd like sometimes?
Yeah. So unfortunately, that does happen. So when we founded the company, we thought like, should we charge an agent if, if it fell through and no one's getting paid? And we figured since it's kind of normal for the industry, the loan officer doesn't get paid, title doesn't get paid, the agent doesn't get paid. So if a transaction does fall through, we don't charge anything for that.
Yeah.
And that's if it
Yeah.
falls
Fair
through
enough.
2 minutes after going under contract or 2 minutes before closing.
Yeah, because unfortunately, we do see that. So, and what do you see like moving forward here with the real estate industry? It's ever changing, and there's
Yeah.
some maybe some big changes coming up here in the future. What do you see as far as changes to the transaction coordination services and how you're working with agents moving forward?
I think honestly, because it popped up a lot more over the last couple of years, there's not going to be a whole lot of changes for transaction coordination, but I think slowly how agents start to approach it might be a little bit different. How they understand more, maybe the difference between a transaction coordinator and assistant and things like that. I think once agents can understand that difference, of that transaction managers or coordinators are specialists in managing transactions, they know it in and out. They either manage 20, 30, maybe 40 or 50 a month. So they definitely have the experience to handle that, which is a little different to maybe having an assistant, which is also definitely needed. But it's better to kind of leverage your assistant on, maybe helping you coordinate showings, managing your calendar, following up with your database, making sure that gifts are going out to your clients, things like that. And then you have this transaction expert who is licensed as well, who is able to, fully manage your transaction and know everything about it. Because the idea is that we're not reaching out to you and asking questions. We also have an in-house broker who the transaction manager would reach out to.
All right. How do you help in, some of these transactions can be very complex.
Yeah.
And, sometimes agents struggle with that, so how can you be beneficial to an agent in some of these more complex type transactions?
Well, what we see most of the time is basically it's just we're assisting the agent. Well, sometimes the agent's vent to us a little bit, and that's helpful for them, of just having that kind of sounding board throughout the transaction of what's happening and that reassurance. But obviously, because we're managing the transaction, they're not really having to follow up with that issue as much. We're the one actually kind of taking a lot of the legwork of that issue and then kind of presenting all the information and stuff back to the agent and again letting them make the decision on anything that comes to negotiation, stuff like that. But we will go back and assist. Let's say we need to make a change after an inspection, something needs to get fixed. We would kind of help facilitate that. But we obviously wouldn't do any negotiation. But we take that, the follow-up and paperwork off of the agent and kind of just go back to, hey, here are the options. Here's what we got back. What do you want to negotiate? What do you want to do?
Yeah, so that's good. So it's another set of eyes on the transaction to help find a solution to the problem, right? That's
Absolutely.
really important. And
And
sometimes, go ahead.
a lot of these bigger brokerages that are coming up, like EXP, LPC, they're great brokerages, but sometimes it's a little tricky to get a hold of the broker. So obviously we're not liable still, but with us having a broker in-house, our transaction manager can also, pick up the phone and call that person and get that additional expert advice and help as well.
That's great. Yeah, having a knowledgeable broker at hand. I know I've get a lot of agents reach out to me with different
Right.
situations. They're like, well, what would you do? Or, want my advice from having been a managing broker for several years. But I try not to give too much brokerage type advice. I usually will tell people, go talk to your broker. Find your broker, right? If your broker's
Yes,
not easily accessible, you definitely want somebody, either your broker or your
definitely.
compliance manager or somebody. So yeah, because sometimes, yeah, sometimes these transactions become very complex, and there's always something new to learn on each and every transaction. So it's important for us to pay attention to that. So one of the things that you have to deal with, just as in real estate, we deal with people, and
Yeah.
the wonderful thing is we get to work with people. It can be fun, exciting, and And then the flip side of that is we have to work with people. And unfortunately, agents are people. And
Yep.
so you've got your agents that are good communicators and really good at what they do. And then you've got your other agents that are not so good at communication, and it's like pulling teeth getting information out of them. How do you deal with that? How do you work with the agents that are not so good at communicating? Because you're trying to pick up their slack,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I mean, your hands are tied because you don't everything you need.
So, like I said, when we sign up a client, we have that initial call. We have the agent directly with the transaction manager and our team manager. And that's where everyone kind of sets expectations, goes over maybe communication. This is how I'll do this. Let's say there's some agents who are a little bit more involved and it's more like we are waiting on them. And there's some agents who are like, you know what, you can just manage the transaction. Let me know if I need to negotiate, basically. So we kind of understand right out the gate what type of agent they are, how they want us to work with them. And then we, again, kind of adapt that a little bit and kind of hold them a little bit to what they want us to do. So if they want us to check in with them every Tuesday for 30 minutes and have a phone call, then we'll do that. If they want us to send them a text every time we have a new thing that we need from them, then we'll do that. So we always kind of just go back to adapting and getting everything set up in the beginning before we even have a transaction, so that when a transaction does come through, it's not like, oh, what do we do? How do I work with you? It's expectations already been set. You send it over and we get working on it. But when it comes to communication, because we are introduced to everyone in the beginning, it makes it a little easier for, let's say, if we were waiting on something from title, we can reach right out to title and, grab it for the agent, things like that.
So you actually do reach out to the lender, the title company, to
Yes.
the agent on the other side, and all this. So it saves the agent a lot of time and effort.
Exactly. And the way we kind of positioned it is we do everything contract to close. The only time you have to kind of lift your finger again is when it comes to negotiation, obviously anything in person, and then writing up the original contract and blank addendums. But even if you write up the blank addendum, we can assist in sending it for signatures, following up to make sure those signatures get signed, all that good stuff.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I've seen people rely on a transaction coordinator actually write an addendum, and I don't suggest that. I suggest yes, you can send it out for signature. I mean, but having writing up something, I would definitely leave that up to the agent and make sure it's got the proper verbiage in there. Just because we're
Well,
in the transaction, right?
yeah.
We know the verbiage that's needed, or we can get with an attorney and get the proper verbiage. And that's so critical, because a lot of times I think what happened was he had the transaction coordinator write up the addendum, did not proof it. It went out and the seller was like, no, this is not what I said to write up. And the seller didn't sign off. They passed their inspection period. So the agent was hung out to dry for $1,000 that they, had agreed
Yeah.
upon, but they didn't get accomplished because it wasn't written up properly. So that's where it's really important that we know the roles of everybody involved, right? And not put more responsibility on a transaction coordinator than what was originally agreed upon. Again, it comes to managing expectations and
Mhm.
being able to work together. So what can you suggest? Give me like a few of the best practices for a real estate agent when it comes to utilizing the transaction coordinating services.
I think, again, right out the gate, setting that expectation and making sure you get everything, like if you're maybe a little skeptical, or make sure you're asking your questions to your transaction coordinator, making sure that, I mean, even interview them if you want to, try and trick them a little bit and see if they, don't understand what something means. You do need to make sure that the person who's managing your transaction is actually as experienced as they're saying they are, because there's a lot of people who unfortunately aren't out there. So I'd say that kind of making sure you're setting your expectations up front, because and that's from there, honestly, just kind of doing that, we see helps a lot throughout the transaction, because we've already set the expectation. You're already telling them what you want them to do, how you want them to do it. So I'd say that. And then again, communicating with your transaction coordinator and making sure maybe that you introduce them to your clients maybe a little bit before we're calling them. So let's say you go to that listing appointment at signed. Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure you know that Bobby, my transaction manager, is going to be reaching out shortly to introduce themselves. They help me with this and that. That just also helps with the warm, handoff of your client. And it coming from you as well makes it look a lot better. It's also nice because it makes you look like you have a bigger team as well, which you do. You're having additional support now. You know, they're not just paying you, the realtor, is what some people could say. I'm not saying that. But you're paying for a team now. You have a listing specialist, you have a transaction specialist, you have a marketing specialist, you have the agent who is the sales and expert in everything real estate. So now you're selling a team now that you have.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And look, I promote, that we should all represent ourselves as a team. Doesn't mean we have to have a team of agents that are a part of our team. It's the team of support team that we work with, and transaction coordinator is definitely one that should be on everybody's list. Same with, maybe an assistant or virtual assistant to handle with the smaller details that, we need to save our time for doing the higher dollar work and the work that the income producing activities, that keep us in business. So this opens up that opportunity to be able to do more and be able to make more and scale our business. So I think that this is just a great way for agents to ease into it, especially like if they don't have an assistant yet and they're kind of leery about, well, I don't want to pay somebody. This can kind of help ease into it because now they're paying for a service that is going to be based on a contract that they had, right? So it's going to settlement and they'll pay for it at the time of settlement versus paying up front. And then they can realize just how much time it saved them throughout the process when it's all said and done, right? They can say, look back and say, man, yeah, saved me a lot of time and effort in trying to, keep everybody on the same page. So
exactly.
So that's cool. This has been very informative. Any last minute words of wisdom for agents that are watching this?
The only thing I wanted to share, if it goes back to your time, if you're not out there, going to listing appointments, prospecting to your sphere, engaging your sphere, making more connections and growing your business, then what are you doing? Yeah, it's $3.99, but that's $3.99 for, let's say, even if it's just 10 hours that you've saved, that's still 10 more hours that you could invest into making connections, growing your business, and, increasing your dollar per hour as well, which is really important. So
yeah, we're trading our time for money, and the more systems, the more people we can put to work for us, the more we're operating as a business, and the less we're exchanging our time for money because we have other people, other systems in place to be able to help us make more money. So this is cool. So if somebody wants to reach out to you and talk to you more about your services, how can they reach you, Bobby?
yeah, so they can go directly to premiertcsvc.com, or they can text or call me directly at 407-337-4472.
All right, awesome. Look, Bobby, this has been very informative. I appreciate you taking the time to come out and talk about your transaction coordinating services, and it's definitely something I'm a big supporter of. I think that this is something that's so important for agents and be able to implement into their business. So if they have any questions at all, they should definitely reach out and have a conversation, and just so that you can talk to them specifically about their business and how you can have a huge positive impact in it.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having us.
All right, Bobby. Thanks again. Appreciate you.
Thanks.
Take care.